All right, let's just jump right in. Today, we're talking about one of the weirdest, most fascinating elements out there, mercury. And what makes it so cool isn't just that it's a liquid metal, but it's got this wild ability to dissolve other metals, creating these incredible alloys. Now, this whole process has a name, amalgamation. You can pretty much think of mercury as this universal solvent, but specifically for metals. And believe me, it can lead to some seriously bizarre results, sometimes turning solid metals into goop, or, as we're about to see, turning a liquid into a solid. And that brings us to the big question for today. What in the world happens when you take this kind of calm, liquid metal and you try to mix it with an element that literally explodes on contact with water? I mean, sodium is so reactive, you have to store it in oil. This should be interesting. So, let's set the stage for this chemical showdown. In one corner, you've got sodium. It's like the featherweight powerhouse of the periodic table. And in the other corner, you have mercury, the dense, liquid heavyweight. Let's check out the tail of the tape. Wow, okay, this table really lays out the challenge we're up against, doesn't it? Sodium is a soft, super-duper reactive solid, and it's so light it just floats. Mercury, on the other hand, is ridiculously dense and pretty unreactive. I mean, they're total opposites, which kind of explains why you can't just toss them together and hope for the best. And that brings us to our first big roadblocks. First, the sodium is coated in oil from storage, and the second it hits the air, it gets this crusty tarnish layer. It acts like a little protective shield. So even if you drop it into the mercury, it just floats on top because it's so light, and that tarnish layer stops any actual contact from happening. It's like trying to mix oil and water, but, with a much higher chance of bursting into flames. So, how do you solve a problem like that? Well, you've got to get a little creative, and maybe a little forceful. And that brings us to our first experiment, the attempt to forge a solid chunk of metal out of these two unlikely partners. Okay, so step one, drop a cleaned piece of sodium in. And absolutely nothing. It just bobs there, totally unimpressed. The solution, you take a glass rod and you literally have to shove the sodium under the surface. But even that's not enough. You have to start scraping and crushing it, trying to break through that tarnish to expose the pure, shiny metal underneath. You're just waiting for that one little moment of contact. And then this happens. 1 second you're scraping away, and the next, with this little thump, the entire chunk of sodium metal is just gone. It's instantly swallowed up by the mercury in a flash. So what just happened? Why was it so sudden? Well, it's a classic positive feedback loop. That first little reaction creates a burst of heat. That heat melts the sodium, which exposes way more surface area, which makes the reaction go even faster, which creates even more heat, and poof, the whole thing just runs away with itself in an instant. But hold on, here's where things get really weird. After adding a couple more pieces of sodium in the same way, something completely unexpected happens. The whole mixture, which was almost entirely liquid mercury just moments before, it completely solidifies. A few minutes later, you've got a solid chunk of metal, hard as a rock. So we did it. Our first quest is a success. But what exactly did we just create? It's time to take a closer look at this brand new material and figure out what its secrets are. This new solid amalgam is a strange thing. For one, it's super brittle. You can just crush it into a powder. And when you break it open, you can see these really beautiful crystalline structures inside. Turns out, it's not just one compound. It's probably a complex mix of at least 6 different stable arrangements of sodium and mercury atoms. And listen, I gotta be serious for a second here. The dust from this stuff is incredibly dangerous. You do not want to be inhaling reactive sodium and toxic mercury. Okay, so you might be wondering, why on earth would anyone make this stuff? Well, this right here is the whole point. We all know what happens when you drop pure sodium in water, right? It's violent, fiery, explosive. But the sodium amalgam? It still reacts like crazy to produce hydrogen gas, but the whole thing is completely controlled and safe. The mercury, it basically just tames the sodium. And this taming effect isn't just a cool party trick. It has some really important real-world uses. In chemistry labs, it's used for something called reductions, which is basically any time you need a safe, controlled source of reactivity. And here's the kicker, you've almost definitely seen it without even knowing it. It's a key ingredient inside those old-school, orange-glowing sodium vapor street lamps. But hey, our quest isn't over yet. Making a solid is one thing, but what if you want a liquid amalgam? Well, that brings us to experiment number 2, trying to tame that fire and create a much more controlled liquid version. So the new goal is super specific. We want a liquid amalgam with a really low concentration, just about 1% sodium. But remember that fiery feedback loop? When you try to do this on a bigger scale, every time a piece of sodium reacts, it shoots to the surface and bursts into flames, leaving you with a smoky, contaminated mess. So how do you stop that from happening? The solution is actually pretty elegant. Fire needs oxygen to burn, right? So what if you just get rid of the oxygen? By flooding the whole setup with an inert gas, something like nitrogen, you shield the sodium. It still reacts like crazy with the mercury, but with no oxygen around to fuel the flames, there's just no fire. Simple as that. And the results? It's a total success. Doing the reaction under this blanket of nitrogen gives you a beautiful, clean, pure liquid sodium amalgam, exactly what we were hoping to create. So now we've got 2 totally different materials, both made from the exact same 2 ingredients. Let's put our solid creation and our new liquid one side by side and see what's really going on here. And here it is, the main takeaway from all of this. It all comes down to one simple thing: concentration. When you have a higher concentration of sodium, you get a brittle, highly reactive solid. But with a low concentration, you get a fluid, gently reactive liquid. It's just a perfect example of how in chemistry, changing the recipe by just a tiny bit can give you a completely different material. And that really gets to the heart of what the mercury is doing in all this. At the end of the day, it's not really participating in the final reaction with water. It's acting more like a carrier, or maybe a diluting agent. It takes the raw, explosive power of sodium and just spreads it out, making it manageable, useful, and safe. Which, it leaves us with one final thought. We took a soft, explosive solid and a dense, stable liquid. And just by tweaking one number, the concentration, we created 2 totally different things with their own unique properties. It really makes you wonder, if this much is possible with just 2 elements, what other incredible transformations, what other hidden properties are still out there, just waiting for us to discover them in the endless combinations of the periodic table?